Serious. What is the most paranormal or unexplainable events you have witnessed? Hey guys, it's Em. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Story 1. I was 10 years old. It was a Sunday morning between 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. My mother was in the kitchen preparing lunch. As she was washing the veggies, the water pressure from the tap started to fluctuate. Water would flow, stop flowing, like someone was playing around with the tap. My mom asked out loud, "Who's messing with the water pressure?" The valve for the water tank was just outside my house, and my dad went to inspect it, and I followed him. Nothing was out of place. As we walked back into the house, we saw before our very eyes, bloody chicken claw prints emerged one by one. It's like a chicken with bloodied feet walking through the hall, except there was no chicken. Freaked me the F out. But we were just stunned and stood there staring as one footprint emerged after another. There were about 5 or 6 claw prints in all before it stopped. Everyone in my family saw it. We didn't discuss it immediately. My parents just wiped the claw prints off. What made this event worse was the fact that it occurred during a very turbulent period in my household. My mom had schizophrenia. But at that point, she wasn't diagnosed yet. She heard voices in her head, hostile voices, and was convinced that there was a grand conspiracy against her, and people were planning to kidnap me and my sister. She didn't trust my father, her mother, and her siblings. So when something legitimately paranormal happens, it just F's everything up. Like in a world where bloody chicken prints appear, why wouldn't there be some occult conspiracy? Those few months were the most traumatic of my childhood. My mom was admitted into a psychiatric facility a few weeks later after being diagnosed with schizophrenia, but dealing with her paranoia and violent outbursts against everyone, not her children, broke my world. Part of me even believed her. Having some legit paranormal stuff happening in the middle of the day didn't help me at all. 17 years later on, she is still on medication, but she is stable and fully functional. Even when she was going through the worst of her schizophrenic episodes, she was never neglectful, always loving towards her children, always dutiful. But she was overprotective during those times. I was afraid that I'd get schizophrenia because it is somewhat hereditary. My mom's sister became quite unstable a couple years ago. To complete the double jeopardy of insanity, my dad's sister also had paranoia, and her son was admitted for a manic episode. So this propensity for psychotic disorders on both sides of the family tree has made me pretty resolute on not getting married and having kids. Sorry that this post has veered from bloody chicken prints to me offloading about schizophrenia. I never told any friend or girlfriend about it, so I guess I just took this as a chance to vent. That must have been so difficult to try and deal with someone who is having a genuine mental crisis and is hallucinating things to all of a sudden a real paranormal experience that everyone else can see. I'm guessing it definitely strengthened OP's mom's resolutions that everything she was thinking was real. On another note, I'm sorry that your family has gone through so much, OP. I have some family who have a long history of having bipolar disorder, so I can somewhat understand you on that. Your decisions are justified, but please don't feel that you can never have a family, as mental illnesses don't have to always control your life, and I'm sure you'll find someone who will help you, if you choose to live a life together. Story 2. Unsure if it's a haunted house or more of something becoming attached to me. Not long after I met my current boyfriend, I would spend the night at his house. Normally, I fall asleep as soon as I hit the pillow, but at his house, I would be awake super late, feeling creeped out. I blamed it on being in a strange house. After a while, I used to fall asleep at a decent time, but I would wake up at 2 to 3 a.m. and try to let my eyes adjust to the darkness. Small town equals very little light pollution. Once I would adjust, I felt like I could see a little boy on top of the grandfather clock. This would happen every night for a while. I never felt scared, just confused. It looked like a boy wearing older style pajamas kicking his legs on top of the clock. Still, I would blame it on sleep paralysis, dreaming, or my imagination. When I would go back to my parents' house for the school nights, I would start waking up in the middle of the night, seeing these same apparitions sitting on the dresser or ledge in my room. I slept alone in the basement of the house after months of seeing the little boy. I wanted to sleep upstairs again as I figured my mind was just getting to me. One evening I was home alone as my brother and parents were gone to some appointment. I happened to fall asleep on the couch in the living room only to dream that the little boy was knocking down my mom's ornaments that were on the coffee table. I woke up in a cold sweat and looked at the table. Sure enough, the ornaments were broken. Of course, it could have been broken beforehand and I never noticed. It started to get chilly in the living room, so I moved to my mother's bedroom to watch TV before they came home. In her bedroom, I kept seeing stuff out of the corner of my eye that looked like the little boy, but never really had a full-on view. At this point, I was sure it wasn't sleep paralysis or dreaming, because I could move when I woke up, and sometimes I would be wide awake. I fell asleep in my mom's bed and woke up to the little boy laughing and running in the closet. Friday of that week, I went to my boyfriend's house, and he knew something was up, but I wouldn't tell him out of fear that he would think I was crazy. That night I was helping his mom bake, and I happened to mention that I was having really weird dreams about a little boy, and she asked me if he was a young one with his jammies on. She knew what I was talking about. She told me that their house was pretty old and all. I know all about the struggle of going to a partner's house for the first time and wanting to impress their parents, so you keep your mouth shut about any problems. Granted, my problem was just a faulty shower that didn't spray properly and not a little boy running around his jammies. But hey, potato, potato. Story 3. I'm late, I'm gonna get buried. But I'll share something I experienced from ages around 9 to 12 or so. I used to live in a house that was built on old farmland. I slept in a bedroom that had no door, except for the door leading up to the attic, which had a little sliding lock on it. Every night I'd close the door and lock it. The attic frequently had birds and such get into it, and I didn't feel like having them fly out. Except every single morning it'd be unlocked and slightly ajar. During the night I'd wake up and have sleep paralysis. It was pretty frequent, and I got used to it. During said sleep paralysis, a figure would open up the closet and slip out, all black, sort of shadowy, and wearing what I can only describe as a farmer's hat. It'd stare at me for a moment, just stare. Sometimes it'd take a step over before turning and walking out the entrance to my bedroom. It locked the door, but I'd set up some beads. They'd knock together. I can still hear it to this day. I had always been told I'd had an overactive imagination. I never spoke of it to my parents or family, since they'd probably make fun of it. One summer, my cousin came to visit. She took over my room since my family thought she deserved a larger room for whatever reason. She came down for breakfast in the morning, white as a sheet, and said I could have my room back. When my mother asked why, she told her that she had sleep paralysis and basically saw what I had. I had never spoken to her of this. Years later, once we'd moved out of the house, my mother told me something. Her bedroom was in the same hallway as mine, and she always slept with the door open. She told me some nights she'd wake up just to see a figure pass by the bedroom quickly. She stopped getting up to check it after the first few times, but the house always gave her the creeps. I don't really know if it was a shared delusion or what, but it still scares me a bit to this day. Look, as soon as multiple people all say they saw the same thing without conferring about it, I'm gonna believe them. I do always feel bad for people when they mention they as kids have overactive imaginations, so just no one ever believes them. Story 4. My stepdad found our puppy Eddie on the side of the road. Someone had thrown him out of a moving car, and he had broken legs, broken teeth, a swollen and closed eye, and was severely dehydrated. My stepdad took him to the vet and paid quite a bit of money for surgeries to get Eddie fixed up. He got attached to the doggo, so we ended up adopting him. After that, even though he was the family dog, he was best buds with my stepdad. Anywhere my stepdad was around the house, you can find Ed tagging along. Eddie and I grew up together. He died while I was away in college, and my parents buried him in a pet cemetery. Since it was sort of sudden and I was far away, I didn't get to say goodbye. A few months after that, I had a dream where Eddie came and found me. His hair is matted and dirty, and his flesh looks kind of rotted, but he's wagging his tail and seems happy to see me again. Eddie starts leading me down a hazy path, and the farther we go, the faster his tail wags. Finally, we get to this giant wall of mist that extends across the entire horizon and rises higher than I can see. Eddie gets real close to it before trotting back to me. He licks my hand, gives me a couple nose boops, and whines a little. Then he turns around again and starts to do that happy dog prance towards the wall, till he finally passes through it. I can sort of see his outline jumping up and down excitedly next to a human-shaped figure. I jog after Eddie and reach my hand out to touch the wall, hoping I'll be able to pass through it too. That's when my cell phone rings in real life, waking me up. When I answer it, my mom is on the other end crying. My stepdad had just died of a heart attack. Story 5. My niece was sitting in the kitchen doing her homework. I was outside playing PVZ on my phone, and my mom was doing laundry or something. I heard an awful crashing noise, and I ran inside to see dishes shattered all over the kitchen, encircling my niece. We asked her what happened, and she said the dishes came flying at her. There was no way she could have done it, because like I said, the dishes were circled around her, and she couldn't have sat down that quickly. It was weird. One day, I was with my friends, and suddenly my head started getting heavy, and my vision began to white out to the point where I couldn't see anything at all. I immediately thought that someone could have drugged me and asked my friends to help me walk to a place where I could get some air and sit down. My sight was coming back, but I couldn't speak or express anything. Couldn't respond or answer what my friends were asking. Somehow I got into a trance, and it felt like I was seeing my surroundings from an above-me perspective. My friends called my mom and she picked me up. I still couldn't respond until I got home and went to the bathroom. 3 days later, my mom received a call from my grandpa, and I immediately knew what was going on. He told her that my dad had passed away and was found dead in his bathroom. I live with my mom, and my dad used to live in another state. The forensic report showed that he died on that exact same date, and probably around the moment I've had that episode. I have a couple. Geez, OP, that sounds absolutely terrifying to experience. And then to find out later that it was because your dad passed away. Talk about a rough couple of days. I hope that you're doing better now, OP, and that you're healing from the trauma of losing your parent and your episode. Story 6. I'll bring out this story again. It happened to me 7 years ago, and I can't figure it out, but I lost an hour of time in what felt to me like minutes. At the time, I was working from home after a serious illness diagnosis. I had settled into routine, up at 7 a.m. and do house stuff and shower. Then at 8 a.m. start prepping my work and laying out my day. Phone calls and emails from 8 to 9. This is all I remember. It was 7:55 and I brewed up a cup of Keurig coffee in my kitchen located on the main floor of my house. I went upstairs to my office and turned on my computer to settle in and realized I forgot the coffee in the kitchen. I went back downstairs and got the coffee as soon as I realized I forgot it. Couldn't have been more than the time it took Windows to boot up, but I took a sip and the coffee was cold. Not warm, but actually cold. I thought my Keurig was broken, but I looked at the clock and it said 9:14. So whereas I expected it to be 8:05 max, somehow an hour and 10 minutes passed without any explanation. It was very bothersome. I have no idea where that hour went. I have never had any blackouts before or since. No seizures, and the meds I was on shouldn't have elapsed like that. I don't think I fell asleep because I distinctly remember typing my password and saying out loud, "Crap, I forgot the coffee." It kind of left me a bit uneasy. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before or since. Story 7. When I was about 5 or 8, I had a little ghost girl that I played with. We played board games and she carried around a small stuffed bunny. My parents saw game pieces move when no one was there, but I saw her. They also saw her on occasion. One night, our house caught on fire. Electric shortage in the kitchen. Parents called 911, etc. Firemen said that the fire melted a pipe under the sink and put itself out. There was soot everywhere. When we came back the next day, written about a little girl level in the soot on the kitchen wall, it said, "I did it." No one had been in since the fire. I work with donated human tissue. We process stuff like bones, tendons, and skin for transplant. The controlled work area that we process the tissue in definitely has weird things happen in it. Small stuff like repeated or inexplicable equipment failure. Tools falling off flat surfaces, and sometimes the tissue itself will react strangely to processing, i.e. a young donor whose tissue will fall apart or exhibit other poor disposition for one reason or another. Sometimes a donor will have so many problems before their processing that it just feels like they did not want their former body parts to be transplanted. I have definitely got strange vibes while working. I'm not saying that they are knowingly or purposely haunting us, but there is an energy that is hard to deny. Talk about an imaginary friend. I thought most imaginary friends just played with kids and had little tea parties, but I've never heard about one starting a fire. Story 8. The first one was when my ex died. I had a 4-month-old daughter at the time, but we didn't live together. The night he died, I heard someone walking into the bedroom where my daughter was and very clearly heard his voice talking to her. I called out, thinking he may have come in through the back, but no one answered. I found out the next day he died sometime during the night, probably around the time I heard the voice. The second one happened at the last place I lived. It's nothing terribly spooky, but I rented a townhouse and figured out that in my daughter's room there was attic access. I was stoked, because that meant I could probably store my Christmas decorations up there. I got a kitchen chair to open it up, and I couldn't. Not physically. Physically, it was easy to open. Something mentally stopped me from doing it. I had a huge fear, so I left it alone. Sometimes I'd get really eerie feelings, but I chalked it up to being the first place I lived in alone in a while, 2 years at that point. But I don't get those feelings in my new apartment at all. I found out that my neighbor not too long after the attic incident, that the guy who lived there before me was a raging alcoholic and hung himself in the house, in my daughter's room, the one with the attic access. Story 9. When I was in high school, my younger brother and I shared a bedroom. His bed was on one side of the room and mine was on the other. My brother was an avid sleepwalker and would also talk in his sleep all of the time. Sharing a bedroom with him, it was unsettling at first, but I eventually got used to it. One night, it's around 3 a.m., and I suddenly wake up from a deep sleep, instantly alert. I had this urge to look towards my brother's bed. I felt a presence in the room. When I turned my head, I saw a tall, skinny shadow, human-like figure. and it was reaching its hand down towards my sleeping brother's face. Its hand got maybe an inch away before its head jerked to the side and looked at me, staring at it, frozen. The shadow then faded and moved up into the air, vanishing through the ceiling. Immediately, my brother shot up out of his bed, stood and walked to the light switch. He turned it on and looked at me. In a very calm and solemn voice, he says, "Did you feel it? Did you feel the hand?" He then turned off the light and went back to his bed. I hid under my covers the rest of the night. My brother doesn't remember any of it. Story 10. After my mother died, I went to her grave a few times a week. I usually had my kids with me, and this one day as we passed all the older cemeteries, my eldest son, who was 6 at the time, asked, "Mom, what are all those people waiting for? Why are they just standing there?" The cemetery was empty and not a single human was there. When we got to my mom's grave, he held my hand and said, "Don't worry, Grandma's with Mom and they are happy." Mom was my mother's sister, who passed away before my husband and I were even married. My son knew nothing of her or what we called her. He also would tell us when someone had died in a house. Maybe this Sixth Sense movie had something right after all. I do definitely feel that kids are more in tune with the supernatural than adults, but I'm honestly not sure why that might be. Maybe it's because they're more willing to believe in it, or maybe it's because they have pure souls. Who knows? Story 11. When I was 13, I woke up in the middle of the night to a strange man's voice. I couldn't understand what he was saying because he was talking really fast. But at one point, I heard it say my brother's name, and then it started laughing manically. My dad heard it too and came running into my room and turned the lights on. No one was there. Absolutely no explanation. Another time, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I heard what sounded like a cult gathering right outside my window. It was like 3 a.m., and I could just very clearly hear a group of people singing and chanting while a baby wailed. After about 10 to 20 minutes, it suddenly stopped. Story 12. I have one. It must have been some kind of hallucination, but it really scared me. I was sitting in my bed watching YouTube for a couple hours. I got up and reached forward to set something on my nightstand or whatever. I had this strange, indescribable feeling that I hadn't actually moved from where I was sitting at all. I quickly turned around and looked at where I was sitting seconds before. And there I was, still sitting there. I was outside my body. I could see the shocked, horrified expression come to my face at such a strange sight. I quickly sat back down right in the same spot and nothing strange happened again. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.